Get ready to step back in time and witness history like never before. We're about to unveil a remarkable collection of photographs featuring some of the most legendary figures from the past. Let's get started. Abraham Lincoln. He led the United States through its Civil War and issued the Gettysburg Address. Andrew Jackson. He was a president who fought for the rights of the common man and led the U.S. to victory in the War of 1812. Annie Oakley. She was a famous sharpshooter who toured with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington. He was a British military leader who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. Billy the Kid. He was a young outlaw who was killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett at the age of 21. Buffalo Bill Cody. He was a frontiersman, Pony Express rider, and showman who founded Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Butch Cassidy. He was a charming outlaw who robbed banks and trains across the American West. Calamity Jane. She was a frontierswoman who was known for her daring deeds and her rough-and-tumble lifestyle. Charles Darwin. He was an English naturalist who developed the theory of natural selection. Frederick Douglass. He was an escaped slave who became a leading abolitionist and author. George Armstrong Custer. He was a daring cavalry officer who was killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Geronimo. He was an Apache leader who fought the U.S. for decades. Grigory Rasputin. He was a Russian mystic who had a strong following among the royal family. Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was an abolitionist novelist who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book that helped to fuel the Civil War. Harriet Tubman. She was an escaped slave who became a conductor on the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. Helen Keller. She was a deaf-blind activist who became a symbol of hope for disabled people. Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He was a British engineer who designed iconic structures of the 19th century. President James K. Polk. He was a relatively unknown president who achieved many goals. Confederate President Jefferson Davis. He was the President of the Confederate States of America during the Civil War. Jesse James. He was an outlaw who robbed banks and trains across the American West. John Chapman, aka Johnny Appleseed. He was a nurseryman who planted apple seeds across the Midwest. Abolitionist John Brown. He raided Harper's Ferry in an attempt to start a slave revolt. John Herschel. He was an English polymath who contributed significantly to the invention of photography. John Quincy Adams. He was the 6th President of the United States and the first president's son to be elected. John Tyler. He was the 10th President of the United States. Mark Twain. He was an American author and humorist who was best known for his novels Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Martin Van Buren. He was the 8th President of the United States and the first president to be born an American citizen. Robert E. Lee and his son William Henry Fitzhugh Lee. They were Confederate generals during the Civil War. Daimyo Shimazunari Akira. He was a Japanese feudal lord who was the subject of the first Japanese photograph still in existence. Queen Victoria. She was the longest reigning British monarch until 1901. Vincent van Gogh. He was a post-impressionist painter who suffered from mental illness and sadness throughout his life. Wild Bill Hickok. He was an American frontiersman and lawman who became a Wild West legend. Wyatt Earp. He was a legendary Old West lawman who was involved in the gunfight at the OK Corral. Conrad Heyer. He was one of the earliest born people to be photographed and fought in the American Revolutionary War. Wilbur and Orville Wright. They were known as the fathers of modern aviation for making the first continuous powered flight in 1903. M. Lefebvre. He was a sergeant in Napoleon's 2nd Engineer Regiment in 1815. Robert Cornelius. He was an American photographer who is credited with capturing the world's first selfie. So, those are just a few of the most famous historical figures who were actually photographed. I hope you enjoyed learning about them, and I'll see you next time.